Welcome to the M19 Commander set review. I hope you're excited for some Elder Dragons and some 5-color horses. But before we jump into the video, this is brought to you by IntegioTraders.com. We've got you covered for all of your M19 needs. Like I mentioned earlier, let's go and take a look at some of the Elder Dragons that were printed in M19. Really excited about a lot of these cards. I can't wait to build them. We have Arcades, the Strategist. It's basically going to be another Defender deck. Whenever we cast a Defender, it's going to enter the battlefield. We get to draw a card. And then each creature we control Defender is going to be able to attack and assign its combat damage, basically based on its toughness, and they can attack as though they did not have Defender. Now, some of the ways that you can definitely abuse Arcades, that's going to be ways of, maybe flickering some of your walls, bouncing them off the battlefield to get some more card draw going, and then really kind of pumping up with some creature pump spells, some instant speed spells that give them plus 0, +4, +0, +5. There's some pretty good cards out there that really will buff your creatures, being able to swing across and take advantage of that. Outside of combat and simply casting some of these Defender spells, there's a lot of ways you can actually, a lot of combos that are in Arcades. There's a Kelp combo where you can get a lot of kelp walls down, end up kind of drawing your deck out. I will be making a deck tech for Arcades, so kind of be on the lookout for that one, but that's going to be the Elder Dragon that I'm most excited to start building. Up next, we have Chromium, the Mutable. It does have Flash, can't be countered, and it does have Flying, and then it does have a discard ability. Discard a card is basically going to become a 1/1 human. It's going to have hexproof and can't be blocked. So this is pretty much everything that you want in a control style finisher. It can't be countered, it has Flying. At the end of the day, it has another way for it to protect itself, and the way it protects itself, it also kind of enables some sort of graveyard strategies, or simply, going for some sort of Enchantress graveyard. It's really open as far as wherever you want to take Chromium. And then the fact that it does turn into a 1/1 that is unblockable allows you to kind of run a Voltron package in there with stuff like Sword of Feast and Famine, and then Quiet as Spike, which is going to allow you to kind of attack your opponent's life total. Onto the Jund Dragon, we do have, whenever it attacks each player, choose target permanent that player controls. Those players sacrifice those permanents, and each player who sacrifices a permanent this way reveals the top card of the library, put it on the battlefield if it is a permanent card. Now, one of the ways you can definitely take care of the Dire is by making sure that we kind of set up the top part of our library to give us the most advantage. So there's going to be stuff like Vampiric Tutor and Worldly Tutor. These are going to be ways that we can target our opponent's permanents and make sure that our permanent flips are going to go onto the battlefield and give us the most value. Some other really good creatures around there would be recurring creatures, stuff like Bloodghast. Let's say you choose one of your opponent's creatures, we sacrifice Bloodghast, we make the land drop on the second main phase. That's going to allow us to bring back Bloodghast and kind of get us, basically keep us ahead on card advantage. Up next, we have Nicol Bolas in the Ruiner. With Nicol Bolas, this is going to slot into pretty traditional Grixis control style shell. It's going to enter the battlefield, so if there's another way for you to kind of flicker Nicol Bolas, you can really kind of start attacking your opponent's hand. And then it does have the 7-mana activation, which is going to turn it into a Planeswalker. Once again, you're going to slot really well into a control style deck, especially with that activated ability of turning it into a Planeswalker. There's a lot of options for you to go to. That +2, draw 2 cards, it's really, really strong. And then we also have Ruiner. It's going to have Flying, Vigilance, and Trample, and it has hexproof if it hasn't dealt damage yet. Like most of these dragons, they kind of slot really well in almost a control style shell. As far as the Ruiner goes, I'm not entirely sure where I want to take the build. I might end up building kind of a Naya control style deck with that one, but really, pretty much the Naya Dragon's the one I'm least excited about. It's still pretty cool. There's just not really a whole lot you can do with that one. In fact, if you do have some suggestions as far as where I should take the Naya Dragon, hop in the comments below, let me know, because that's the one where I'm just kind of like, not really sure where I'm going to be taking it. Now, outside of the dragons, there are a set of WUBRG monocolored commanders that are really cool. We have Lena, Selfless Champion. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we'll be able to create a 1/1 White Soldier creature token for each non-token creature you control. And then we can sacrifice her to make sure that our creatures are indestructible, power less than her power. So it's really good in that she's going to enter the battlefield, give you a ton of soldiers. At the same time, you can protect those soldiers by sacrificing her to make sure they gain indestructible. Now, as far as building Lena, there are a ton of options you can go for that one. She cares about having a lot of little creatures on the battlefield, and then you can really take advantage of that by her entering the battlefield. Throw in stuff like Panharmonicon to really increase the number of soldier creatures that you have on there. You end up with a really big soldier army. We also have Sai, Master Thopterist. Really excited about this card. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with Flying. Then for a 2-mana activation, sacrifice 2 artifacts and draw a card. It's going to be a great support card in the 99 for most of your commander decks that care about artifacts, and it's going to be a great standalone commander. Can't wait to throw this in Joyra to kind of give us a secondary win condition once we have those turns where we really start churning through a lot of our artifacts. And then simply just maybe building, I haven't really looked at any sort of combos that can go with Master Thopterist. I typically don't really look at a lot of combos when I'm building commander decks, but with Sai, simply just building a value artifact deck, getting those Thopters going would be more than enough for you to build up some sort of board state that's going to allow you to close the game out. Now onto the black commander, we have Izareth, the Awakener. Love this card. Death Touch, whenever she attacks, you may pay X. When you do, return target creature card with convert mana cost X from your graveyard to the battlefield with a corpse counter on it. Then if that creature would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. Now it is a little weird that we do have to swing in with her. Usually your mono black reanimators you're looking at an activated ability or something along those lines. The fact that she does have to swing in to get that ability, she does have Death Touch, and we are looking at a 3/3, but it kind of, I don't know, it's a little clunky to me. You can definitely build her as a commander, but I'm almost kind of viewing her more as a support card by putting her into the 99. Now onto the red and green commanders, we have Lathliss, the Dragon Queen. Whenever another non-token dragon enters the battlefield, we're going to get a 5/5 dragon creature token, then a 2-mana activation. Dragons you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. Not too much to break down right here. Throw in some good haste enablers, get a lot of red dragons going, and you'll be able to kind of show your opponents a really good time. Now, on to Goreclaw, Terror of Kalsizma. I was super excited when I saw this card. Maro spoiled it on Twitter, and we found out it was a legendary bear creature, and I was like, all right, we're going to be able to build Bear Tribal, can't wait. And then we got to see the rules text, and then there's nothing to really support Bear Tribal. I will definitely be building Goreclaw. I don't know if I'm going to be building it Bear Tribal just yet, just simply because there's a lot of hoops you got to jump through to build Bear Tribal. It's still a pretty cool card itself. Creatures you control, you cast with power 4 or greater, cost 2 less to cast, and then whenever it attacks, each creature you control with power 4 or greater gets +1 against trample until end of turn. Now that's a pretty powerful effect on the back end whenever it swings in to give that +1 and gain trample. So I will be building, power 4 or greater deck with Goreclaw for sure. I'll probably still end up building a Bear Tribal deck later on afterwards, but at least for the initial build, I'll be trying to basically optimize it as much as possible, and unfortunately there's just not a lot of support within the bears to kind of get that going. Now let's say that they do take the design of bears going forward a little bit differently. Maybe they start printing a lot of bears that have a power, at least a power of 4 or greater, something like that. That might make it to where one day we can make Goreclaw a Bear Tribal Lord, but at this point right now it's going to be a little clunky to do that, but that shouldn't stop you from building Bear Tribal with Goreclaw. Go for it. Be a really flavorful commander to go for. Now, onto the 5-color horse cycle. So this was really cool. Was not expecting this in the M19 release. I'm not going to read all of them, but long story short, some of them have protection from certain colors, and they have a unique ability whenever they enter the battlefield, or like Surge Mare deals combat damage to a player. You may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. Same thing with Lightning Mare and Vine Mare. Vine Mare has hexproof, and Lightning Mare can't be countered, and it doesn't have that menacing to give it +1/+0 until end of turn. And of course, there is an artifact horse. As it enters the battlefield, choose a color. Whenever you cast a spell, the chosen color, you gain 1 life. So if you're a horse enthusiast and you want to build a 5-color horse deck, you have the very beginnings of your very own horse deck. Let's go and move on to the white section of M19. So we have 2 Ajani Planeswalkers. One's going to be in the dual deck. One's being released in the set. We have Ajani, Adversary of Tyrants. Put a +1 counter up to 2 target creatures. Then we can return a creature card, converting mana cost 2 or less. And for the -7, you get an emblem that says create 3 1/1 white cat creature tokens with lifelink. Onto Ajani, Wise Counselor. We're going to be able to gain life for each creature we control. Then that -3 is not too bad. +2/+2 until end of turn. And then -9, put X +1 counters on target creature, where X is your life total. Nothing too crazy with these Ajani's Planeswalkers. They are commander playable, depending on what sort of deck you build. If you've got a cat deck or something like that one. But yeah, nothing too crazy. Nothing to write home about on these. And let's go and jump into some of the actual white cards within the deck. So, they did release Ajani's Welcome, which I'm really excited about. Definitely going to be throwing it into my Darien deck. Little effects like this are always really powerful, especially at 1 mana. Whenever a creature you control enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life. So I'm going to throw that into Darien. Any sort of Soul Sisters deck that you'd want to, that cares about life gain, definitely run that in there. So it kind of gives you a little bit of a diversifying your risk, especially if you have your Soul's Attendant down or something like that. It's going to force them to have some sort of enchantment removal to get rid of Ajani's Welcome. Cleansing Nova, it's going to be the board wipe for the set, destroy all creatures, or you can destroy all artifacts and enchantments. It's always nice to have spells that have a little bit extra options off of that one. And then we also have War Leader. Whenever it's going to attack, create 2 1/1 white cat creature tokens with lifelink that are tapped and attacking. Like I said, if you've got a green white cat deck, that would go perfectly in that one. On to the next ones. We're also running, get to see Remorseful Cleric, pretty cool. Sacrifice and exile all cards from target player's graveyard. Sun Clizzard, really unique for commanders. Going to enter the battlefield, remove all counters from target creature. It can't have counters put on it for the rest of the game as long as it's on Sun Clizzard's on the battlefield. Then it also has the other option of target opponent loses all counters. That player can't get counters for as long as it remains on the battlefield. So that's another way for you, if you're a white player, let's say you're playing against a deck that runs has a lot of experience counters going, something like Marion, you can get down Sun Cleanser, kind of remove their counters and make it to where they can't get those counters anymore for the rest of the game. And then we also have Valiant Knight. Other knights you control get +1/+1, and then for an activated ability, knights you control gain double strike until end of turn. Let's move on to the blue section. So we have two Tezzeret Planeswalkers I'm actually really excited about. We have Tezzeret Artifice Master. Love this card, cannot wait to start playing with it. We have the +1 ability, it's going to be able to protect Tezzeret, create a 1/1 Thopter creature token with flying. Then for the 0 ability, draw a card. If you control 3 or more artifacts, draw 2 cards instead. Now if you're building a Tezzeret deck, more than likely you're going to have more than 3 artifacts on the battlefield. So that 0 ability of drawing 2 cards is going to go a really long way. Then for the Night is Mine ability, at the beginning of your end step, search your library for a permanent card, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Very powerful Planeswalker, very commander playable, and in fact, I cannot wait to start playing with it. I do have a Finax Mindcrank deck that I play, and I'm thinking about shifting it into the Chromium deck, and then I'll definitely be using a lot of these Tezzeret cards. Then we also have Tezzeret Cruel Machinist, +1 draw card, 0, until your next turn, target artifact you control becomes a 5/5 creature in addition to its other types. And then for the -7 ability, put any number of cards from your hand face down onto the battlefield. They become 5/5 artifact creatures. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're building a Tezzeret deck, you can never have enough Tezzerets to really kind of work with your artifacts, and so I'll probably be putting it in there too, maybe kind of swapping it around. But other than that, not a bad Planeswalker for that. Let's go and jump into some of the core cards within blue that I really like from the set. We have Aether Tunnel. That's going to go great for any sort of your Voltron's deck, mainly looking at something like Yidris. +1/+0, can't be blocked. Exclusion Mage is going to be another one that's going to be able to bounce creatures back to your opponent's hands. And then Metamorphic Alteration. This is really cool to see. Enchant creature. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature. The enchanted creature is a copy of the chosen creature. I don't know what you can do with this, but I just really found the card really neat. It reminded me of an old school Magic card. And then we also have Mirror Image, which is really cool. You can have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature that you control. Now, Cackling Counterpart, that's something you can do. You can create copies of it, but the main thing with Mirror Image to take away is that it is a creature. You can bounce it. So let's say that you are playing as some sort of flicker deck. You can have it enter the battlefield, get that enter the battlefield trigger, and then late game, if you need to take care of something, you can bounce that Mirror Image back onto the battlefield and have it come in as a copy of any sort of creature that you need to. So it really does have a lot of use in the long game as far as Commander. They also released Mistcaller. Sacrifice it until end of turn. If a non-token creature would enter the battlefield and it wasn't cast, exile it instead. Really cheap effect for something that's really powerful, especially if your meta game has something that's going to bring a lot of creatures out of the graveyard or, something out of the library, who knows, but simply being able to sacrifice it and then make sure that it gets exiled instead, it'll be really good for you. Up next is Nexus of Fate. You can be able to take an extra turn after this one, and the cool thing about Nexus is it does not get exiled. In fact, it gets shuffled back into your library. So you're always going to have access to it. One with Machine, draw cards equal to the highest converted mana cost among artifacts you control. Like I said, this is going to go great in any sort of artifact deck that you're building, and especially something like Pedium. And then Psychic Corrosion. Whenever you draw a card, each opponent puts the top 2 cards of the library into your graveyard. If you're a mill enthusiast, it's always nice to have extra options off mill, especially getting down something like Psychic Corrosion and drawing a bunch of cards, making your opponent mill out on that one. Another cool card was Skilled Animator. Whenever it enters the battlefield, target artifact you control becomes an artifact creature of 5/5 for as long as it remains on the battlefield. I don't know. I love the art. Got the bookcase in the background. Just thought it was really cool. Like I said, if you're running an artifact deck, throw it in there and have some fun with it. And then we get kind of like the Spirit Lord. Flying, other spirits you control get +1/+1. Now, moving on to black, there's 2 Liliana Planeswalkers. We have Liliana Untouched by Death. +1, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. If at least one of them wins a zombie card, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Then for the -2 ability, Target creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is the number of zombies you control. Then for the -3, you may cast zombie cards from your graveyard this turn. Now the cool thing about this is that it immediately enters the battlefield. It doesn't have this crazy ultimate. You can use that ultimate to start casting cards out of there if you have a ton of mana late game, or simply you can start using that +1 to really start milling it out and really start helping you really kind of get your graveyard going. This is definitely going to go into a lot of my zombie decks, a lot of decks that care about cards in the graveyard, and it's just going to be an overall great utility card. Now there's no ultimate to work towards, but the card itself is just so good. I can't wait to play with it. And then there's also Liliana the Necromancer. +1 target player loses 2 life, -1 return target creature card from graveyard to your hand. Then for the -7, destroy up to 2 target creatures, put up to 2 target creature cards from graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. Now, yeah, a little clunky. Probably not going to see some commander play with that one. I mean, just the +1 and the -1 are really not that good, but it could find a home somewhere. The -7 is pretty cool, but like I said, there's probably some better stuff you can be doing at 5 total converted mana cost. Now let's take a look at some of the core black cards that kind of caught my eye. We have Blood Divination. As additional cost to cast a spell, sack a creature, draw 3 cards. Love sacrificing creatures and I love drawing cards, so I had to put this one in there. They also printed Bone Dragon. It's flying, and then for a 5 mana activation, exile 7 cards from your graveyard, return to the battlefield tapped. Now, if you are building some sort of Dredge style deck, some sort of a Reanimator style deck, you're going to be having a lot of cards in your graveyard. Being able to bring a creature card out of your graveyard simply just for 5 mana, it's always nice to have that option. It's not the best thing in the world you could be doing, but like I said, if you're caring about cards in your graveyard, it's good to have that option. They also printed Demon of Catastrophes, which I absolutely love this card. I got in during Return to Ravnica, and so I love Desecration Demon. I love that 6/6 flyer that has this downside. So basically, as an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature, it has flying and trample. I'm definitely heavily considering putting this into the Church of Athreos. I love that ability, the fact that it does have a sack outlet on top of it, and it's actually better than Desecration Demon in that, well, not necessarily better, but it has that enter the battlefield sacrifice. With Desecration Demon, your opponent could sacrifice a creature during the beginning of combat to tap it down to where you couldn't attack with it. With this one right here, you sacrifice 1 creature, you're good to go. So always having a 6/6 flyer with trample is really good. Up next, we have Fraying Omnipotence. Each player loses half their life, then discards half the cards in their hand, then sacrifices half the creatures they control, round up each time. Definitely a really fun commander card to get going if you want to see the world burn. There's also Graveyard Marshal. Really excited about this card. 3 mana activation, exile a creature card from your graveyard, create a tap 2/2 black zombie creature token. Now, the cool thing about Graveyard Marshal is that activated ability, it's an activated ability, not a tap ability. So you can swing in with Graveyard Marshal, you can activate it on your opponent's turn, you can activate it during your turn. You're completely open as far as that activation goes. And also sitting at 3/2, you know, get a few zombie lords on the battlefield. You're actually looking at a creature that can swing in pretty well. And I love the art on this card. It reminds me of core set art, which just... like I said, I'm really excited about M19. I got in during one of the core sets, so they've always had a real special place in my heart, and Graveyard Marshal definitely reminds me of the core sets that I got into Magic with. And also, that double black on Graveyard Marshal is going to give you some good devotion for those decks that are going to be running Grey Merchant. Some of the other cool black cards that I really enjoyed, it's going to be Infernal Reckoning. Exile target colorless creature, you gain life equal to its power. It is a little narrow, but if you hate the Eldrazi as much as I do, you might want to run it in a few of your decks. It'll also kind of catch some problematic cards, stuff like Wormcoil Engine. That way they're not going to be able to keep getting those tokens going and gain life equal to its power. But I absolutely love that there's an Eldrazi inside that demon's hand and he's just squeezing it like that. There's also Liliana's Contract. Enters the battlefield, you draw 4 cards and you lose 4 life. At 5 mana, that's really not that bad. Then it has at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 4 or more demons with different names, you win the game. So I'll definitely be building some sort of demon deck to take advantage of Liliana's Contract. Flavor-wise, style-wise, really good card. You know, I would maybe play it at 5 mana, drawing 4 cards, but the fact that it has that secondary win condition with those demons, hey, sounds like a really fun thing to do. And then there's also Liliana's Spoils. Target opponent discards a card, look at the top 5 cards of your library, reveal a black card from among them, put it in your hand, put the rest on your bottom in the library in a random order. It's not the best black spell that you can have, but allowing you to kind of target your opponent's hand, making them discard a card, and getting a little bit of card advantage by looking at the top 5 cards of your library. Pretty good. If it milled into the graveyard, oh, definitely run it in a heartbeat, but it'll find some home in some sort of commander decks. Now, the card that I'm really can't wait to get going is going to be Open the Graves. This is definitely going into the Church of Athreos. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. This is going to fuel all sorts of stuff. You get aristocrats going, you sacrifice a lot of your a lot of your creatures on the battlefield. Being able to tack on an additional 2/2 zombie is really going to help you kind of push some sort of board state. Can't wait to get this in there. And then also there's a little, if you look right above the M19 symbol, there's a zombie or maybe like a human with a frying pan that's trying to hide from the zombies. And I don't know, I just love it. I didn't see that until somebody pointed it out and I was like, oh, that's really cool. So anyway, you got somebody holding a frying pan right there. And then there's also Stitcher Supplier, really good zombie, 1 mana, enters the battlefield or dies, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. That's going to slot really well in any sort of deck that's going to be sacrificing your creatures that care about getting as much stuff into the graveyard as possible. Okay, so moving on to red, we do have 2 Sarkhan Planeswalkers. Really neat that we do have a 3 converted mana cost Sarkhan. So we're looking at +1, you may discard a card if you do draw a card. Then for the +1, add 2 mana in any combination of colors, spend this mana to cast dragon spells, -7, get 4 5/5 dragon creature tokens with flying. Now, not too bad for that +1 ability, discard a card and draw a card. You know, typically if you are playing a red deck, one of the hard things to do is get some, some sort of consistent card advantage going. So that +1 ability is not that bad. The -7, it's good. It's something to work towards. And that +1 will really help you in any sort of dragon deck that you do have. Now, onto Dragon Soul. +2, it's going to deal 1 damage to each opponent, each creature your opponent controls. -3, it's going to deal 4 damage to target player or planeswalker. And then -9, search your library for any number of dragon creature cards, put them on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. That -9 effect, if you're running a dragon style deck, that's really pretty powerful for it, and it's really not that crazy that you're looking at 2 tick ups from Sarkhan Dragon Soul to really start working towards that ultimate. Add into the fact that you're probably playing dragons already to begin with, you're going to be in a really good position to protect them. It's not that far-fetched. You may end up with a really good ultimate off of that. Some of the core red cards that really kind of caught my eye were really cool. We have Apex of Power. Love this card. Exile the top 7 cards of your library. Until end of turn, you may cast non-land cards exiled this way. Then, if the spell is cast from your hand, add 10 mana of any one color to your mana pool. So, you got your unique red spell. I'm definitely going to be throwing this in Nin the Paint Artist, just allowing you to kind of look at the top 7 cards and cast those cards is really good. And if you do get into spots where you can, something like Neheb, cast it out of your hand, that's just going to be even silly in Neheb. There's also Dark Dweller Oracle. I thought this was a really unique card. So 1 mana activation, sacrifice a creature, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. So kind of, I'm not entirely sure what sort of build it would go into. Maybe it might go into Sequar, Deathkeeper, but simply being able to sacrifice a creature and then playing that card. Now, since it does say play, this is going to allow you to play a land, and since it doesn't say cast, that's another way for you to kind of get ahead, at least dig a little bit deeper to find some lands. Then there's also Dismissive Pyromancer, 1 red mana activation, discard a card, draw a card. Then for 3, deals 4 damage to target creature. So it's a way for you to early game to, just kind of start filtering through your library, and then late game, once you've kind of got it established, use that 3 mana activation to deal 4 damage to target creature. There was also Goblin Trashmaster, and I don't know, I just thought it was really cool. For 4 total converted mana costs. It's a Goblin Lord to begin with too, +1/+1. Then sacrifice a goblin, destroy target artifact. This would just be absolutely silly in any sort of Krinko deck or any sort of Goblin tribal deck. The fact that it's a Lord's always good to begin with, and the fact that you can sacrifice a goblin to take care of some artifacts across the entire board, that's always really good. There's also Sarkhan's Unsealing, which I thought was a really unique red enchantment. Whenever you cast a creature spell with power 4, 5, or 6, it's going to deals 4 damage to any target. And then whenever you cast a creature spell with power 7 or greater, it's going to deal 4 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker that they control. So depending on how you have your commander deck set up, getting this down for 4 mana and then just simply kind of getting that incremental burn damage as the game goes on really get you some really good value. The other 3 red cards that I really enjoyed, we're looking at Spit Flame. It deals 4 damage to target creature, and then whenever a dragon enters the battlefield under your control, you can pay red to return it. So great in a dragon deck. They also released Stud. So as the additional cost to cast a spell, sack a creature, deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to any target. Now that is only 1 red mana. Depending on what sort of deck you're building, if it is a fling style deck, it's always good to have redundancy in Commander, and the fact that it only costs, now you don't have instant speed access to it, but at 1 red mana, it's still a really good powerful card. And there's also Volley Veteran. Whenever it enters the battlefield, it's going to deal damage equal to the number of goblins that you control. So this is a great way, like I said, if you're playing Krinko, get this down, enters the battlefield, you can be able to deal that damage to target opponent. And last but not least, we have the green cards from M19. That's going to be Vivian Reed. +1, look at the top 4 cards cards of your library, you may reveal a creature card or land from among them, put it in your hand, put the rest on the bottom. -3, destroy target artifact or enchantment or creature with flying. Then for the -8 ability, creatures you control get +2/+2, have vigilance, trample, and indestructible. Wonderful Planeswalker card for Commander. It's cost right. It has a great starting loyalty at 5 total converted mana cost. That -3 is going to keep you active and keeping stuff off your opponent's side of the board. And that +1 is going to give you some really good card advantage. Solid Planeswalker all around. You know, it's got a really good ultimate too that really, you know, it's pretty much what you want to be doing with green is getting a lot of creatures onto the battlefield and using that +2. And the fact that they have trample and indestructible, it's going to be really hard to deal with. So solid Planeswalker. Can't wait to update it across our decks. And there's also Vivian of Arcbow. +2, put 2/+1 counters on one target creature. -3, target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature. And then the -9, creatures you control get +4/+4 and gain trample until end of turn. You know, the 6 converted mana cost Vivian's not too bad if you want to roll it. It kind of depends on the deck that you're going out there, but that is a Planeswalker Commander for you. Now, moving on to the green cards that I really like within M19, we have Aggressive Mammoth, which is really interesting, trample, and then other creatures you control have trample, so I mean, nothing to write home about, but it's nice that it does give the other creatures trample. There's also Colossal. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. So one of the things that they do in green, it's hard to get really good card advantage. And so stuff like Colossal is going to allow you to get that extra card draw during your upkeep, and at the same time kind of keep pushing that high power creature game plan. There's also Druid of Horns. Whenever you cast an aura spell that targets Druid of Horns, create a 3/3 beast creature token. Now that's not for each enchantment that's on it. Basically, as long as you can keep targeting, you're going to get those 3/3 beast tokens. So this would definitely be a really good card to run in any sort of enchantress build that cares about getting auras onto your creatures. I'll definitely be throwing this into my Gitrog deck as a secondary kind of win condition. Let's say Gitrog's been taxed out too much into the command zone, so we can get this down, start casting some of these aura spells, and start generating some of those 3/3 beast tokens. Really excited about this card when they spoiled it. Seems like a lot of fun. Can't wait to play with it. There's also Dryad Greenseeker. Activated ability, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it in your hand. Now, if you're playing mono green, you've got Prophet of Crufix, you've got Oracle. This is another way just to kind of dig a little bit deeper into your library. It's not the best card out there, but hey, being able to grab a card off the top, put it in your hand is always really good. And then we also have Elvish Clancaller, simply just an Elvish Tribal Lord +1/+1, and the activated ability will do you no good within Commander because you can only use one of them in there. But if you're playing Standard, 6 mana, you can grab another copy of Elvish Clancaller. That way you can get double elves on the battlefield. Hungering Hydra was another one in here. Enters the battlefield with X+1 counters on it. It can't be blocked by more than one creature. And then whenever it's dealt damage, put that many +1 counters on it. So kind of get into spots where, you know, they keep trump blocking on it. You can keep getting counters on it. If you're building a red-green deck and just running Fling in there, you may end up with a ton of +1 counters on there. The only downside is it does not have trample, but if you have some instant speed action, you can give it trample and then kind of start swinging across on that one. Runic Armasaur, really excited about this one. Whenever an opponent activates an ability of a creature or land that isn't a mana ability, you may draw a card. So this is something you can get down if you have an opponent that has, you know, some sort of combo deck or something like that, or land style deck that's going to hopefully kind of end up giving you a lot of good card draw over the course of the game. And there's also Scala Wolf. Whenever it enters the battlefield, look at the top 5 cards of your library, and you get to reveal a green card, put them into your hand. So it's another way for you to kind of get a little bit of card advantage within green, at the same time giving yourself a 3/3 body onto the battlefield. There's also Thorn Lieutenant. Becomes a target of spell or ability. Create a 1/1 elf green warrior creature token. Now that, when it becomes a target of a spell or ability, it's from your opponent, not what you do. So at the end of the day, it's an okay card. It might see some commander play in that 6 mana activation. It's going to get +4/+4 until end of turn. Now, Vivian's Invocation. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Then, whenever a creature is put in the battlefield this way, it deals damage equal to its power to target creature and opponent's control. So, as you can tell in the art, you can be able to channel Vivian's inner bow and arrow, kind of shoot a creature off the top of your deck, and have it fight a creature whenever it enters the battlefield. Now, let's go ahead and move on to some of the multicolored cards in here. There's actually only about 5, pretty good mix in here. We're looking at Heroic Reinforcements. Create 2 1/1 White Soldier creature tokens. Until end of turn, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain haste. At 4 mana, it's a little pricey, but the effect's not too bad, you know, especially if you have an entire red-white board or a ton of creatures on the battlefield. Poison Tip Archer, I was really excited about this card. It has Reach and Death Touch, and then whenever another creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life. So You're going to miss out on that life gain from that, but for the most part, if you're an Aristocrats fanatic like me, I love Aristocrats, having another option outside of black to make your opponent lose a life when a creature dies is always good to have, and the fact that it says whenever another creature dies, so it's not going to trigger for itself, but let's say you do end up casting a board wipe, your opponent has 10 creatures on the battlefield, you cast that board wipe, that's going to be 10 poison tip archer triggers that you can get going, really helping you kind of amplify out some sort of Aristocrat style win. There's also Regal Bloodlord. At the beginning of your instep, if you gain life, you get a bat token, which is always pretty cool. We're seeing some more bat token stuff in here. And then there's Satyr Enchanter. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, draw a card. And then Sky Rider Patrol. At the beginning of combat in your turn, you may pay Simic. When you do, put a +1 counter. It gains flying until end of turn. Mainly, I put it in here because, look, it's an elf riding a mantis. I don't know, couldn't pass on that one. But that would also slot really well in any sort of +1 counter deck. In fact, I'm going to have it in my Cadell and Rayhan deck. And especially with Satyr Enchanter, you don't really see a lot of Enchantress card draw pieces, so I'm really excited to get this one updated across a lot of my commander decks. Now, moving on to artifacts, there's some pretty cool stuff in here. We have Amulet of Safekeeping. Basically, it's going to, if you have any sort of deck in your meta game that runs a lot of Storm, it's going to host Storm. Makes them, if somebody's going to target you, it's going to cost 1 to pay that one, and the creature tokens get -1, -0. There's Arcane Encyclopedia, 3 mana activation, draw a card. Always good to have that, especially if you're building something like a mono white deck just to get a little bit of card drawing. Now, Chaos Wand. Check this card out. 4 mana activation. Target opponent exiles cards from the top of the library until they exile an instant or sorcery card. You may cast that without paying its mana cost. Then put the exiled cards that weren't casted on the bottom in a random order. So, imagine this. You have Chaos Wand on the battlefield. You have a few mana rocks and you have Paradox Engine. You activate Chaos Wand, cast a spell, untap all your artifacts. Basically, if you get Chaos Wand down, some open mana rocks, and you get down Paradox Engine, you're going to be able to cast all the instant and sorcery spells out of your opponent's deck, and they will be absolutely thrilled. They'll thank you for such a fun time. They can't wait to see it. You should definitely not do that. The other card that I really enjoy is going to be Desecrated Tomb. Whenever one or more creature cards leave your battle. So really, when I saw Desecrated Tomb, I was so excited because in my head, I just saw, hey, whenever a creature leaves your graveyard, create a bat token. So I imagine doing this like Living Death for 20 creatures, and 20 bats are going to come out on the back end. And I was really excited. I was talking to the Discord, and somebody's like, hey, it's when one or more creature cards. I was like, oh. Okay, but it's still a cool card. I enjoy it. It really will work well in like a Grimgrin style deck, something that you're trying to keep just a constant flow of creatures in and out of your graveyard, especially in Grimgrin when you sacrifice Bloodghast, make the land drop, comes back out. It's a bat token. You can sacrifice the bat token now, or you can sacrifice Bloodghast. It'll really keep you open. It's a good card, but it's not necessarily as powerful as I originally thought it was. That would be really cool if it did. And there's also Meteor Golem. Look at this. All right, enters the battlefield, destroy target non-land permanent opponent controls. Definitely throwing it into Traxos, and to have a card that's doing like the superhero, like smash down into the ground, taking care of a permanent. I don't know, I just love thinking about him coming from somewhere off of the playing field and destroying whatever sort of planeswalker enchantment that is causing you some sort of problems. There's a few more artifacts in here that we're going to cover. This Sigiled Seal to Valoran. It's going to get +2, has Vigilance, and whenever it attacks, create a 2/2 white knight creature token that's attacking. There's also Sky Scanner, which is actually really going to work out in any sort of egg-style artifact deck that cares about something entering the battlefield, drawing a card. It's a 1/1 flyer. And then there's Suspicious Bookcase. It's a wall. Here we go. Defender. And then target creature can't be blocked this turn. So it's always nice to have that ability depending on what sort of deck it is. And then I don't know, just we have a bookcase now in Magic, which I thought was really cool. Really cool card, Transmogrifying Wand. Enters the battlefield with 3 charge counters on it. Then for 1 mana activation, remove a charge counter from it, destroy target creature. Its controller creates a 2/4 White Ox creature token. Now, if you're in a deck, that is a little interesting that they get a 2/4 White Ox creature token. It's kind of going to muddy the board up, but for 1 mana, enters the doesn't even enter the battlefield tapped. So you're looking at 4 mana, destroy any target creature. Definitely commander playable. Then there's also Tezzeret's Gatebreaker. Enters the battlefield, look at the top 5 cards of your library, reveal a blue card or artifact card from among them, put it in your hand, then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. That is a very powerful effect. Let's say you have some sort of flicker effect. You can keep bouncing this, looking at the top 5 cards of your library, grabbing a blue or an artifact card. So whatever deck that has a lot of artifacts and any sort of flicker spells definitely wants to grab some blue cards. So that's really good, simply on the enter the battlefield trigger. And then for the 6 mana activation, sacrifice it. Creatures you control can't be blocked this turn. So if you're building some sort of Tezzeret build, you have a bunch of 5/5 artifacts, it's going to help you close the game out. Now that's going to be the set review. That is it. We've covered Booberg, we covered dragons, we covered horses, we covered artifacts, and we covered multicolor cards. So that's going to be it for the video. Hope you enjoyed it. In fact, if you did, like and subscribe. Thanks. Bye.